Stephanie Tinkell. I'm the Director of Lifelong Learning at Washington Hebrew Congregation, and I'm delighted to see so many of you joining us from so many different places for all kinds of different reasons. It's my honor to introduce this evening's authors, Abby Schneiderman, and in a moment I will spotlight them as well. Who is co-founder and CEO of Everplans. She's an industry expert in the areas of digital estate planning, technology, and consumerism. She's a Forbes.com contributor and has been featured in the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, CNBC, and of course, her parents can later in the comments share all of the additional pieces that I have shamefully left out and that should have absolutely been shared. We also are proud to be hosting, and here they are now visible to everyone, Adam Seifer, co-founder and CEO of Everplans, and he has helped create multiple huge online communities and networks, which could not be more relevant now, and is an inventor on the social networking patent now owned by LinkedIn. And not least, but finally, Jean Newman, who serves as Everplans editorial and education director, and who has spent his career as a writer, editor, and content leader for Maxim.com and other lifestyle properties. All of them are living in New York, but really we're all just living in these boxes right now. So the three of you, I'm delighted to have you share a presentation on what could not be a more topical, if not a little bit delayed. My goodness, we could have used this book, I think, a year ago. We are so delighted to have you present on your incredible book. And I am delighted to hear your presentation. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. And it's really an honor to be here tonight. If you couldn't tell from the parents, talking earlier on, I'm from Washington, D.C. I have been to Washington Hebrew many times at many events, and I'm thrilled to be here tonight with Adam and Jean to tell you about the book that we just released just a few days ago, In Case You Get Hit by a Bus, How to Organize Your Life Now for When You're Not Around Later. But so I thought that before we get into it, I would give you a little bit of the history of how this book and really how our company Everplans came to be. We can start back. Some of you on this Zoom probably remember the drama of when I was planning my wedding back in 2010. And I was using all of these online sites that are out there like the knot.com and Martha Stewart's websites. And I was on them every single day. I was on their apps and their guides and their calendars and their checklists. And I say this all the time. I don't know why my brain went from marriage to death, but I started to think about what's next in life. What are the other life stages that are out there? And what are the resources that are out there that are going to guide me through the rest of my life? And I'm a repeat tech entrepreneur, and I mentioned this idea to Adam, who I had met. Adam's a veteran of the New York tech community, and I said, who's helping people deal with death? And he said, well, somebody is. It's the biggest life stage of them all. And we started looking into it, and we spent about a year researching, meeting up at coffee shops, and after a year, we were shocked at the fact that there was absolutely nothing out there. And so the original idea for really for this book and for this business that we've been doing for the past 10 years was to create the first modern consumer company focused on what we now call life and legacy planning. We actually started by creating content. We wrote, and you can see a picture of the team. This was a few years ago in our office in New York City. We started by creating content. We wrote hundreds of articles on everything from how do you write a will, to what do you wear to a funeral, to how do you name a power of attorney. Today, our website gets over 4 million people a year who come to it just to read the content that we have. But a big part of our personal story, and sorry to my mom and dad who are on the phone tonight that I'm going to bring this up, but a big part of our personal story is that 8 summers ago, my 51-year-old brother, Doug, was killed on his way to lunch in a head-on collision by an impaired driver driving down the wrong side of the road midday. And it was an absolute nightmare for us. It was, my brother had made some financial arrangements, but he didn't have a will. We talk about this in the book. We had no idea how to access his accounts. We had no idea what accounts he even had. And it left us in a nightmare of a situation of having to track things down, figure out what he would have wanted in a really short amount of time. And what this, Adam and I had already been heading down this direction, but what it really made us realize was that, we had to really help people get a plan in place way earlier on. And here's actually a picture of me and my brother. This is one of my favorite pictures of the two of us when I was 2 years old. But what we realized at this moment was that in order to really help people get a plan, as I just said, we had to help them get organized ahead of time, because that way, if a tragedy or emergency struck, families would have easy access to everything that they needed. We began building our planning platform, and this is Everplans, and that's when Jean came on board to help make this whole topic more relatable and accessible to everybody. And this book is a culmination of everything that we've learned and will empower and inspire everyone to get a plan in place. When we started writing In Case You Get Hit by a Bus well over a year ago, we obviously didn't know that the entire world would change the way that it has, which we address in the book's introduction. And Adam, if you don't mind taking it on.
Sure. Thanks, Abby. And thanks everybody for having us. And I actually see a couple of my friends in the audience who completely unexpected. So that's pretty amazing. I look forward to connecting with you after. But to start with the intro from the book, for more than 10 years, we've been obsessed with helping people get their lives organized in case something unexpected happens. And by far, the most difficult part of our mission used to be convincing people that the unexpected actually happens, and that unexpected things could happen at any time, like getting hit by a bus, as our not so subtle title suggests. And then at the beginning of 2020, the entire world was hit by a bus in the form of a pandemic. The unexpected, the very thing our company was built around, became reality for just about everyone on the planet. Life as we knew it ground to a halt. Those families that could hunkered down to minimize the impact, and most everyone feared the worst. But there were undeniable bright spots too. A warm text from a friend you lost touch with years ago, a post on social media from someone on the road to recovery, a former coworker checking in to see if you're okay. Group video calls with family members became the norm, a chance at least to see each other's smiling faces and poke a little fun at the parents who spent half the call trying to figure out how to turn their cameras or microphones on. Birthdays, holidays, and graduations were celebrated remotely, but we could still be together. These were the moments that made us forget how tough everything had become and focus on what really mattered. The hope and strength we got from those we love would themselves take strength from us in return.
The feelings of hope and despair that arise during a crisis can often motivate us to make lasting positive life changes. But as memories fade and normal routines return, that feeling of hope and purpose can diminish. This book is intended to help you renew, reinforce, and remind yourself of that hope for the rest of your life. We believe that planning for your family and loved ones is the key. Our mission has always been to help as many people as possible prepare for the unexpected. And that mission, to help people ensure that their family isn't left unprepared when the unexpected strikes, has taken on an even greater, more solemn importance now. But really, it was always that way for us. Over time, as more and more people started using Everplans, we realized the site wasn't about death, it was about life. Because getting everything organized lets you live to the fullest, knowing that you've prepared for anything, having done your very best for those that you love. And that's what you'll find in this book, a plan to do just that, and it's easier than you think. And so speaking of loved ones, here's a good question to consider as you get started. And these are my kids. What's important to you? Most people simply say family, but we want you to go deeper than that. What's really important to you? It doesn't have to be one thing. Our lives aren't that simple. It might be something that hurts a little or even makes you uncomfortable to think about, because being challenged can spring us into action. We all have different motivations. Maybe you witnessed the chaos a friend experienced after the death of a family member and don't want your own family to suffer that same fate. A parent might be terrified at the prospect of their young children being raised by an unfit guardian or worse, in foster care. Money is often the cause of most issues, and perhaps you don't want your family going to war over what you leave behind. Or maybe it's as simple as you waking up in the middle of the night completely wrought at a pandemic that went from a story on the news to a new reality. So once you have a clear vision of your purpose, think of it as a picture-in-picture box on a TV screen following you around throughout the entire book. That picture might have an image of your kids, your spouse or partner, your siblings, your puppy, or a person that you love who is now gone. When you get discouraged or overwhelmed, take a second and visualize that image in your head, and then repeat this mantra: this is why I plan.
So thank you so much, Abby. Adam, that was incredible. And just to explain my DC connection, both my sisters went to GW. My aunt and uncle went there, and my niece is just applied, and hopefully she gets in, so we can continue that family legacy. So the one thing we did with this book was we broke it up into 3 levels, and each builds on the last, helping you gather and organize all the stuff that you already have, all the things that you need or you want, and ways to add personal touches to truly make it yours. Every task that we covered throughout the entire book features a plan of attack, which tells you exactly how to get that thing done, how long it should take, and an estimate of the cost if there is any. Sometimes there's none, it's just your time. There are other elements scattered throughout the book, throughout each level, primarily in the form of side missions, where we cover things that may or may not apply to your life, such as if you have young kids, if you care for your parents or someone else, another dependent, if you have pets, or if you run a small business, and so many more. We also have 3 break time sections that cover when you should update your plan, how to have difficult conversations with your family members about planning without emotions just running wild, and the unfortunate consequences when your family or loved ones, the ones they face when there is just no plan at all. Even though this book covers every possible component of a person's life, it's really broken down into digestible pieces. We did not want you getting overwhelmed by this, so we made sure of that. And we're going to give you a brief overview now of each level so you know what to expect. And Abby's going to get us started with level 1.
We start things off with level 1 by helping you get all of the following things in your life under control, which includes a system for managing all your passwords and secret codes, your money and assets organized so that you don't have a panic attack, an instruction manual for your home and vehicles, and a decluttered address book where your most useful contacts rise to the top. I have to admit, I still have to do a better job of this. And if there's one thing that we mention in the book repeatedly, it's passwords. It's almost comical how many times we mention them, and we have no regrets because they've become such a vital part of our lives in so many ways.
The average internet user has 130 different accounts, and each of those accounts requires either an email or a username and a password. And so guess how most people keep track of them all? According to a Pew Research Center study, 65% of people say they keep them all in their head. Yes, that's right. Memorization is the dominant method, which means either everyone is a super genius and, I can't even remember what I had for dinner last night, or what they're doing is they're reusing the same passwords on multiple sites, which we all know at this point is just asking for trouble. And beyond the password issue, unlike your physical possessions, digital assets aren't obvious because they're not lying around the house like your other stuff. And so they can easily get lost or be rendered inaccessible if you don't get them well organized. And when we say digital assets, we're talking about hardware and software. And so this includes your phone, your computer, your tablet, as well as anything else online or in the cloud. It's the stuff like your social media, your shopping, your entertainment, benefits programs, rewards, family photos and videos, and so much more. We refer to this as a digital estate planning, and we cover it from multiple angles throughout the book. And I don't want to give away any spoilers or ruin the surprise, but we start the book with passwords and we end with passwords. They're just that important these days. Another important aspect, though, that we cover in level 1 is managing your home and your important contacts.
And so stop for a second and think about all that goes into running a household. This is one of our favorite illustrations from the book and shows how menacing a house can be if you don't know the ins and outs. from the mortgage or rent to the routine maintenance to the utility bills you pay on a monthly or yearly basis. I don't have to emphasize this point because you already know. A typical household can have more than 15 utilities, vendors, or services associated with it. That doesn't even include how it's financed or any quirks that only you know about, like if part of the basement floods after a heavy storm. In my household, I've told this story now a few times, which is that there was an issue happening, and Dad, you're on the Zoom now, so you don't have to tell us all your secrets, but there was an issue happening with our sink and I didn't know how to fix it. And all of a sudden my dad comes in with a broomstick and starts shoving it down the sink. And I said, Dad, if something had happened to you, how would I have known to get the broomstick and shove it down the sink in order to fix it? So those are the types of things that only you might know about, that are the secrets to your household that you need to make sure your family knows about. Imagine your family trying to piece all of that together without you around to help. Do they even know where you keep the deed? Do the utilities in your name need to be canceled or transferred to someone else? If a pipe bursts, is there a trusted plumber you call to get the job done who won't rip you off? What about maintenance and care instructions for the car? There are dozens of things that you have figured out over the years to help your home operate smoothly, which is why the book explains how to create something that we call a home operating system, which is a helpful and easy to compile instruction manual for your home. We also provide a system to help you get all of the important context in your life organized, which can help save your family in so many ways, whether it's for something routine, during an emergency, or for when it's time to settle your estate. You'll realize while reading this book that level 1 is about getting what you already have in order. And as we move on to level 2, you'll start noticing that we add some more elements into the mix.
And level 2 includes some of the more traditional aspects of estate planning, like legal documents and healthcare directives, as well as a deeper dive into your digital world. Here's what you'll have accomplished after you finish this level. You'll know how to get a will and power of attorney in place, plus information on setting up a trust, how to organize all your bills and debts into a neat, non-depressing pile, how to compose what we call a personal medical journal, and learn everything you need to know about advanced healthcare directives. And you'll have brought order to every digital account and service that you use. This level can seem stressful because it involves things that seem either complicated or things you might want to avoid. We demystify it all and help you understand why making these decisions will eliminate stress from your life. And Adam has 2 personal examples, one involving a will and another involving a healthcare directive, that really brings it all down to earth.
Well, so this is my father-in-law, Marvin, with my wife, Carrie, and he was an incredible man, as Abby's parents know very well. And he died unexpectedly.
Maybe some of the people on this Zoom might know Marvin Himmelfarb as well.
I think everybody knew Marvin. But he died unexpectedly 3 years ago. And, even though we figured he didn't have a will, we weren't entirely sure. And so we had to spend the first couple of days searching all over the place just in case. And then because there was no will, there was no official executor. And my poor wife, Carrie, had to petition the court just to be the administrator of his estate. And we had to put up a personal bond just so that she'd be allowed to do all of the unpleasant stuff, like shutting down credit cards and bank accounts and things like that. It's already so yucky, and these extra steps made it extra difficult for her. And it would have been pretty easy to avoid. Creating a will is not nearly as complicated or as expensive as people think. There's a ton of free or inexpensive options online, and they cover the basics, and they can help you get something in place, which is better than having nothing. And, of course, if you have a more involved estate, like you've got a blended family, or you've got property in different countries or different states, or you have complicated investments, it's well worth the cost of an estate attorney to get this completed once and for all, if only to save your family the unnecessary burden later. And then on the flip side of this, I can tell you a little bit about how planning in advance ended up making all the difference for my mom and for me and my family. There's my mom, Joan. And I think this story highlights the importance of medical directives, and especially an advanced directive, which is the combination of a living will and a healthcare proxy, sometimes called a healthcare power of attorney. And sometimes it can also include what's called a DNR or a pulsed. But regardless, having an advance directive, the importance of it just cannot be overstated. I experienced this with my mom, who unfortunately died this past year after a really tough battle with cancer. And I was fortunate enough to have taken a little time several months beforehand to sit down together with her and with my dad and straighten out her living will and her healthcare proxy. And then while we were at it, I also got my dad to do it, which was great. And we had a chance to discuss what was really important to her. And it was weird. It's a tough conversation, but once we got it going, it just started flowing. And ultimately, when the end came and she couldn't communicate for herself anymore, I knew exactly what she wanted. I knew she wanted to be home. And I knew exactly what she didn't want. And so there were no dramatic arguments with my family. And even better, I'm not tortured by wondering whether or not my decisions were the right ones or whether or not I did the right thing for her. This little bit of communication and planning gave us all a lot of peace, and it gave her control over her end. And there was a study done by Stanford University that found that more than 80% of patients say that they wish that they could avoid hospitalization and high intensity care at the end of their lives, and that they would prefer to die at home, but that their wishes are often overridden because there's nothing in place. And so, there are never any guarantees in life, but having medical and legal documents executed and in place and shared with the right people can really increase the likelihood that you get what you want. And the best part of an advance directive is that it's totally free to do. You don't even need an attorney to do it. And we actually have them all the templates for each state are on our website. And there's a link in the book that'll take you there, or you can just go to everplans.com and search for your state, and you can find it easily and get it done.
We walk you through all of this in the book, along with a quick, easy to understand reason as to what each of these legal or official documents provide and the decisions that you need to make. But here's a quick overview of what we cover. Number one, your will. Who gets your assets, and do you need to name guardians for any dependents? Number two, power of attorney. Who should be making financial and legal decisions on your behalf if you can't? Three is advance directive. Who should be making healthcare decisions on your behalf if you can't? And what sort of treatments do you want? And when boiled down, it's that simple. You'll find most of your effort won't be in doing the paperwork, but making the decisions. And then lastly, trusts. How to protect assets and even what trusts are in the first place, which Jean and Adam know I still find a little bit confusing. Here are some questions for everyone here to think about. Do you have any of these documents in place already? I bet, given this call and who's on it, I imagine many of you have some of this in place. Have you put off creating them? Do you want them, but you're not sure where to start? One of the goals of the book and Everplans in general is to make sure that you create the plan that's best for you and your family. And really that's the mission that we're on. We have the next level, which then talks more about how to actually personalize your plan.
And level 3 allows you to personalize your plan with a slew of finishing touches, which include an organizational plan for all your meaningful photos, recipes, and family heirlooms, a record of your personal history, interests, beliefs, and life lessons so everyone remembers you the way that you want to be remembered, a model for writing letters and recording videos for your family and friends they will cherish for the rest of their lives, a complete understanding of everything you need to know about planning a funeral. Plus, we have a template to write your own obituary if you are up for it.
Now I'm going to share something that's actually not in the final draft of the book, but it's a story I love, and you can think of it as bonus footage. But I was talking about family traditions and the book and Everplans over the high holidays last year at one of our dear friends' homes, where she was hosting a Rosh Hashanah brunch, when she took me aside and led me into her living room. And she showed me something called a miniature chest drink table that her late mother had found antiquing in Canada. And Melanie recalled how her mother had two armchairs next to each other with the chest between them. After her mother died, Melanie and her family were packing up the apartment, and they found these notes on the back of her favorite things, including this chest. And it said, "For Melanie, little table, to Melanie, much love, Mom." And she also left a note on the back of a Salvador Dali lithograph that Melanie bought her in Paris that said, "My only Dali from my only Mel." The miniature table and the lithograph are beautiful, but the notes made them both so much more meaningful. And obviously, this is a beautiful way to express love, to say goodbye, but it doesn't have to be a surprise. While the miniature chest drink table is now safely in Melanie's possession and in her living room, but what if she had never found the note? So cleaning out a late parent's home while grief-stricken could lead to discarding items that have a story to tell. The same goes for a family member swooping in and taking everything, especially if they think those items have value. A person who works closely with us told us how an in-law looted all of the classic furniture from a deceased parent's house before anyone had a chance to claim anything. And while this was many years ago and she's not even sure she wanted any of it, it's still a minor point of contention among the family. So anything that you can do to prevent possible conflicts in the future is always a benefit, especially if it only requires some paper and tape and a few sticky notes.
And here's the thing I learned working with Abby and Adam for many years now. They, like many people, are obsessed with food and they love to cook. So much so that I insisted each of them include one of their favorite recipes word for word in the book so readers can get an idea of how to make sure their own recipes are kept alive for generations to come. I'd now like the master chefs to explain their creations and what organizing recipes means for them. Abby, you go first.
Okay. Well, recipes are extremely important to me, as I'm sure they're important to many people here in attendance. My late beloved babysitter, Lydia, used to make the most incredible empanadas, and we used to have them every year on Halloween and on special occasions. And before she died, I asked her to share the recipe with me. And every time I miss her or our family misses her, I make those empanadas and they bring back incredible memories. Plus, I get to share them with my kids, which then creates a new memory for me to have with them. I didn't include that recipe in the book, but what I did include was my mandel bread recipe that was adapted from, I think it was adapted from my grandmother's recipe and my mom's recipe and probably Melanie's Nussdorf's recipe as well. And you can see me here with my sister. This was just a few months ago, showing my daughter Danny how to make it. Adam actually went a more savory route.
Yeah, I chose something a little bit spicier. It's my chili recipe, and I've been perfecting it for the last 20 years. And it's in this whole spreadsheet where I include replacement options. If an ingredient is hard to find, it automatically recalculates amounts if you plug in the number of servings you want to make. And it has tips like not to rub your eyes when you're handling the peppers, or you'll be really, really sorry. And it's, you can see it there in my yellow pot that I got from my grandmother that I always want to use whenever I make this chili recipe. And you know, this plays into a host of other aspects that we include in the book that helps you to keep your legacy alive. Think of all the personal lessons and tips and knowledge that you might want to leave behind. Whether it's information about your family history that you want the future generations to know, or things that you've loved about your life, or lessons that you want to pass along to your kids and their kids. Technically, it's called an ethical will, but we like to call it Spill Your Life. And we broke it into 6 rounds, so it feels a little bit like a game show. And you know, this stuff might seem obvious, but when you're answering the questions that we pose, you'll realize how many of these questions do you wish that you could have asked somebody else who's no longer around. And this brings us to the final part of the book and the inevitable part of life, the end.
And Abby, could you actually talk a little more about charitable giving? Because I know this is something that we brought up too when it comes to creating an ethical will.
Yes, and we get asked about this a lot, but along these same lines, here's something that I'm sure we can all agree with, which is helping others and giving to charity, which is great, as is devoting your time to a cause. If you've done work to help others, whether it's you volunteer for events, or you're a big brother or sister, or you've manned a phone for a telephone, or you've given donations to organizations that you're proud to support, or maybe you've even gone a step further and allocated money from your estate to make sure that money gets to the right place. These details should be clear and direct so that the people that you leave behind know that you support these causes and that you want to continue to do so. And so I think,
Yeah.
if you go on to the next slide, which is about parting words, we weren't.
Yeah, we really weren't kidding when we said we help you write your own obituary. I know some people think that we didn't actually include a template, but you could see it right here. And there's 4 templates. There's from small all the way up to supersized. But before we walk you through every aspect of that, we talk about planning a funeral, including what needs to be done if you opt for burial or cremation, several ways to set money aside so you get the funeral that you want, and how to add as many personal touches to the service to make sure that the last party you attend is really one for the ages.
This may seem like a sensitive topic, but it could also be viewed as a practical discussion to have with your family. For, just in my family, this might be TMI, but at my brother's funeral, we probably paid way too much for the casket because we didn't know at the time what to do. We didn't know what he would have wanted. And at the time and in that moment, you feel like the more money you spend, the more you love the person. And Dad, I hope it's okay. I'm going to tell this story, but when discussing this with my parents, my mom said she wanted the plain pine box. She didn't, that was what she wanted. But my dad at the time, this was 8 years ago, said he wanted the most expensive casket that we could find. And right before this Zoom call tonight, I called my dad and I said, Dad, I'm going to talk about the fact that you want the most expensive casket. Is that okay for me to say? He said, that's fine for you to say, but I just want you to know I've changed my mind. And now I want the plain pine box because your mother doesn't want me spending all that money on a casket. So that's okay, because the point is you can make your decisions and you get to keep your decisions, but make your decisions known so that, my sister and I don't end up fighting at the funeral home over what we thought Dad wanted. So, but this is why communication is vital, so that you're not spending too much money or too little money, in the case of my dad.
Yeah, I mean, communication is central to almost everything that we cover, because sharing all of your wishes and all of your information is actually what ends up making a plan complete. We know it can be tricky to talk about some of these things with your loved ones. Talking with family in general can be littered with emotional and sometimes suspicious landmines. And when topics include money and medical issues or death, it can be even more terrifying. Consider for a second that people would rather talk about no longer being on Earth than talk about their finances. The Wells Fargo study pictured here and that we have in the book also revealed that although people aren't comfortable at all talking about money, it's one of the biggest stresses in their lives, often causing sleepless nights, as we all know. And so we offer plenty of tips on how to eliminate the fear and the stress from some of these topics and how to break the ice to get your family talking and planning.
This barely scratches the surface of what we cover in the book. It's quite comprehensive if you haven't got your copy already, but we can't wait for you to read it and get your own plan completed and out of the way. And if you think that this book isn't for you, I have one final story. Before I started Everplans with Adam, and as I was explaining this whole thing and the concept and what I wanted to do to my parents, my dad said, I don't need this. All my legal documents and important plans are with a state attorney. And my mom said, but Milton, who's our estate attorney? And so that's kind of the point. You might have a folder with legal documents. You might have done some planning. I'm sure you have, but our lives are made up of so much more. Plus, if nobody knows that you've done the planning or where that planning is, it's sort of like you never did it at all. So the first step is getting started. This book helps you do just that and so much more. Thank you so much for having us. We'd love to answer any questions that you have. Stephanie, thank you so much.
Wow, thank you. I've just re-included the link in the chat for everybody. And I'm also going to just share a link of Everplans because I think people may be curious as well to check out that tool. I will say I'm struck in particular because you're joining us through the Jewish Book Council. If in your research and in your conversations, you spoke with members of clergy, right? If you spoke to rabbis and cantors who do partner with so many congregants, I know in particular, we're joined this evening by Rabbi Sue Schenkman of Washington Hebrew, an incredible colleague and very talented rabbi. That's such a big component of, right, what is happening in a congregational life when we talk about the experience of life through death. So yeah, did you speak with any members of clergy in this planning?
Early on, we definitely had a number of conversations with rabbis in particular. I remember talking about this idea many years ago with a rabbi who was the father of Adam, remember, of an early colleague of ours. And he just thought that this was so incredibly important because people need to be thinking about doing this planning way ahead of time, and they need to let their family know the wishes that they do have, what type of funeral that you want. Do you want a Jewish funeral? In the case of, my brother, who was married to somebody who wasn't Jewish, it was very complicated in the end because we didn't have everything spelled out. I can't tell you how much heartache we would have avoided had some of these things been spelled out ahead of time. And so, Jean or Adam, did you have anything else to add?
We spoke with people of all different faiths because we knew that that was very important. And a lot of it came from the research we've done, researching a lot of funeral traditions and understanding how people leave money behind, how people allocate certain portions of their estate for charities and to their religious beliefs, and also just for guidance and certain things. Especially the ethical will is something that has been handed down over years through traditions. I mean, that's where the whole concept comes from, which is, most people usually get confused. They hear the word ethical will and they think, oh, you got a living will, you got a real will, you got a last will and testament, you have an ethical will. What does that mean? Is that with the right will? And it really is just a personal story. It's basically taken from people saying, this is who I was, this is how I live my life, this is what I believe, and this is what I want future generations to believe.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Just a tiny plug for Washington Hebrew that those of you who may have additional questions after you've bought and read the book and gone through all the different exercises, that please do see members of the congregation as your partners. And even if you belong to another congregation, hopefully it's also a wonderful place where you can find the guidance and partnership, in particular when these questions of ultimacy, these big, big questions are at play. I'm happy to open the floor to others who may have questions. I have 1,000, but I don't want to hog the airspace here. So please unmute yourself if you do have a question. And it's okay if multiple people try talking at the same time, then we will indeed know that this is a Jewish gathering.
Hi, Stephanie, and to our wonderful speakers. This is Jamie Groban speaking. I am a Washington Hebrew lifelong member and a social worker. I've worked in medical healthcare scenarios for many years, and so I greatly appreciate the work that that Adam and Abby and Jean have been doing, because being on the other side when you are working with a family who's in that crisis mode, the tools that you are providing are so helpful to the professionals that are working with those families. So first of all, thank you from that perspective. I have a question about a little bit of the specifics that may be in the book or on Everplans. I have a friend who lost a sibling very tragically, who was still in their young family years. And I know that the wife encountered issues as far as credit cards and things like that that had been active and joint And then when the person just died unexpectedly, how those things came into play. Do you address any of those kinds of preparations that we would want to keep in mind as we're planning for ourselves or advising others?
Yeah, you know, one thing to just point out is that we aren't financial advisors, we aren't estate attorneys. And so what we're really trying to do is help you kind of quarterback a whole bunch of disparate things in your life into one plan. But we do get into some of the things that you're talking about. It happened to my parents too. For some reason, their bank accounts were not set up as joint accounts with rights of survivor. And so, when my mom passed, I had to end up loaning him a little bit of money until we could get things straightened out, because he lost access to one of the accounts that they had used to pay bills. And so we think that setting things up jointly in the proper way is really important. And we mentioned that in a couple of places on the site, but that's also something that we recommend that people speak to a financial advisor about, so that they get it exactly right.
I'm curious if you had to, there's a Jewish saying of explaining something on one foot. If you had to give us a one sentence summary of your book, what would you do?
Well, what I would say is
You've just whittled a whole book down to approximately 28 minutes. So obviously the next best thing is to give it in a sentence.
right. I mean, other than the title, which I think does a good job, in case you get hit by a bus, how to organize your life now for when you're not around later. I would say the other way that we describe it is that it's everything that you need to organize, store, share, and keep up to date, that you need at your fingertips throughout your life, and that your family may need in the event that something happens to you. And so it's really, I like to call it all of the nooks and crannies of your life that oftentimes get overlooked, but become huge disasters for your family if they're not properly organized and documented.
And a lot of it's also personal. A lot of people think, again, they have a will, they have a power of attorney, they have these documents, but your life is made up of more than that. We say in the book, pretty much on paper, everyone's pretty much the same, give or take some, zeros here and there. But when you look at the totality of your life, what made it special? What made it worth living? That's why the last level, when we get to that, we say, why was it important? What lessons would you want to pass on? What were your favorite things? Those aspects come into play because they're the things that are irreplaceable. Those are the things you don't get back. Eventually we talk about defaults, and I love that Adam and Abby brought this up. And it's one of my favorite parts of the book, which is when you don't plan, what happens, because people are always curious. And the whole concept is there is a plan, and it's miserable, and it's going through courts, and it's lots of money, and it's fighting, and it's not knowing if you're sure, and having regrets. And a lot of the concepts that we put together, which is how do you have these things? Because eventually all your finances, property, it's going to get worked out. But if people want to know, and a lot of times we've asked this to people, like, what is a question you want to ask someone who is no longer around? What is that? And how can you ask that to someone today and find out what they lived through, what they went through, especially now in the current times? We keep looking around. Right now, we're living through something. But 20 years from now, people might wonder, what happened then? What were you people? What was, you couldn't see each other? And being able to express those things will be really important at some point. And documenting that is just as important.
And it doesn't have to be complicated legal documents that are where we actually just spoke a few weeks ago to a dear family friend who recently lost her husband. And she said, you know what I want to ask him? Where did he buy the light bulbs? And what are the light bulbs that we need to have in the house, the special light bulbs? And it's those types of things that we just don't think about. I mean, you all know you need to get a will, and you need to get a power of attorney, and you need to, do healthcare directives. The book is about so much more, and all of the everyday things that you need to be thinking about. We're out there talking about our book a lot right now. I did 5 radio interviews today, and one of the radio hosts said to me, well, your story about your husband, is everything going okay? Are you guys happily married? And I said, yes, we're totally happily married. But I will tell you what will make me not happily married is if he doesn't tell me and document what the Wi-Fi password is to our apartment, how I get access to our car in the parking lot that I don't know how to access, what the unlock code to his phone is, and keep those things up to date for me over time. And so we really try to get people thinking about those little things that I can guarantee you will become the things that are driving your family crazy if, God forbid, something were to happen.
I have a question. Your book looks like it's sort of an 11 by 14 size, not the normal size of a small book. It looks like a workbook. I can't quite tell. Is it something, and it's because it's paper book, is it something that you instruct us to do aside from the book, or do you write in the book in a way that you everything is in the book rather than maybe pieces of paper that are scattered because your chapters highlight them? Where do you put anyway, is there a way that you've organized us to keep the stuff together?
Well, the beauty is that the book can be a companion guide to our website, everplans.com, where we allow people to organize and upload and make accessible all of the information that we guide people through getting together in the book. If you don't want to do it through Everplans, you could use a different online platform, or you can do it through other various, attorneys and financial advisors, and keep them keep it all somewhere safe. The book does not have is not meant to be where you keep all of the information. Everplans website is really the best place to do that.
So you go
I have
onto
a
the
question.
website and fill out information onto the website like you would other registration forms or something?
Exactly. It's a highly secure website, and you create your own account, and it's password protected, and it has multi-factor authentication to keep it safe, and everything is encrypted in our databases. We've spent many millions of dollars building a mega secure environment for people's most sensitive information, and we have it broken down into sections. And we lead you step by step through inputting information into the different sections, and then choosing which members of your family or your life that you want to trust to give access to those pieces of information. And you can have certain parts that are only shared with your spouse, and other parts that are shared with your adult children. You can share it with your financial advisor, your attorney, if you want. And then they have to create their own secure logins in order to access that information to keep it all safe.
Is there a membership that you pay to be able to use your website this way?
There's so much information, and I am happy to, if you email Washington Hebrew, I can help connect you to the relevant people to ask specific questions about how to use this incredible tool. I just want to make sure we let other people with questions have a chance in this brief time we have with these incredible authors.
I have a question. I'm Ruth Seelig, and my question relates to the things, the objects, the heirlooms that were passed to me from my family. A lot of people in my generation have children who are in their 30s, 40s, who don't want to clean silver and take care of china. And my parents were very good about doing all of the things that made it very easy to settle their estate. They had all the things that you're talking about, although we didn't need passwords at that time. But what they didn't do, because they, I think, had inherited from their parents, and now because of 4 children, I was the only one willing to take all these things rather than see them disappear. So I have them. And now I'm faced with the next generation that doesn't want any of them. And so I wondered how you dealt with that. And we're talking about cabinets and upon cabinets of objects.
Well, I want it all, so I'll take it. I love that. But I think that that's a really good question. It's actually a question we've never been asked before, but
Oh, wow.
I'll answer this, and then Jean, maybe you can answer too. But I was going to say, I think that this is a perfect example of how communication is so vital, and that if you find out that nobody wants that, nobody wants those things, then that's okay, and you should come up with a plan for what to do with that, and not to leave it behind for the people who don't want to be burdened with the decisions. Now, if your wish is that you do want this to get passed down from generation to generation, which would be my wish, those are the types of things I find really meaningful, then you have to talk with your family about that and come up with a plan for how to do it. Maybe they don't want it, but maybe they can convince their kids or grandkids to take it.
I like the convince. Please take this amazing stuff. In the book, a couple years ago, Abby gave me a book that was a gift, and you gave it to me, which again I loved, which was The Gentle Art of Swedish Death Cleaning, and we mentioned it in our book. And it's such a great concept, and we incorporated some of this in there and gave it full credit because it's genius. But a lot of it is figuring out, while you're still alive, making sure people in your life get the things that they actually want, because sometimes people feel burdened with things and they keep them out of a sense of obligation as opposed to things they want. And if you find out ahead of time, they're like, get it to those people, keep the things that you want, and then other things, maybe it is time to let them go. Maybe it is time to sell them. Maybe it's time to donate them to an organization that would really use them or cherish them if there's no one for them to go to. But it is something that we cover. And I do think having those conversations so people don't have that need to have an entire home packed with every heirloom passed down that no one else wanted, because then that becomes guilty. Then when that person goes, what happens to all that stuff? Someone else either takes it or it just ends up, at a thrift store, or worse, thrown out. And when Abby mentioned that story about Melanie's, the note she found, it's true. How many times do you hear a story about a thrift store where someone found $10,000 in the back of a painting, or a couch that had all this money, because no one ever said that it was there? And that happens over and over again because people don't make these plans. They don't think about it. But by going through those items, saying the ones that are important, allocating them to somebody, if they don't want them, finding someone else, and if they don't want them, coming up with another plan. And no, maybe it's time these are just no longer part, and it's time to, let them go.
The thing that I want to make sure of is that I do not want to be fighting with my siblings over anything if, God forbid, something were to happen to my parents. I want them to have spelled out everything, because the last thing you want to be doing is, at that moment is having arguments, or getting, you've already lost a parent. Now you're going to lose a relationship with a sibling. It's just not the right time. And it's really, it can be avoided.
Well, thank you. This is such a treasure trove of wisdom and heart. And I think that you've given all of us so much to think about and meditate on, and also so much to read now, right? And some planning to do. I know I, for one, would like to start by reading this mandelbread and chili recipe and go from there. But truly and seriously, thank you. This is an incredibly important topic, even if we were not in the middle, unfortunately, of a global pandemic. But as we say Jewishly, kal vachomer, all the more so that right now this gives us the impetus to really start to think about some of these difficult conversations and these really, really critically important conversations. So thank you for this blessing that is the book. And I would just urge everyone one last time, please buy it. If the link in the chat doesn't work, then by all means, you can check the Washington Hebrew Congregation website as well. This seems like a perfect book to give as a gift if you already purchased one for yourself. So Abby, Jean, Adam, thank you so much for sharing your time, your wisdom, your passion, and your compassion with us this evening.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.